Hey everyone, I just wanted to go over some of the complex cognitive processes that we can have, kind of continue our discussion about cognition in general. One of these ideas is what we call concepts. All right, so concepts are when we take any individual object or idea and we try to break it down to its core components and characteristics. So like, what is it that defines what something is? All right, so for example, if we look at an apple, how do we understand what an apple is? And how does that compare to what an orange may be, or a grape, or a cherry, or strawberry, right? So if you look at the different types of fruits, each individual one has a concept and what it means to be that thing. And that helps us distinguish between all the other different types of fruits that we may come across. If we take this further, there's another idea called schemas. All right, this is coming from Piaget. And what it's saying is that we're going to take these individual concepts and put them together into larger schemas. So we have a concept about what an apple is, we have a concept about what an orange is and what a grape is, and so on and so forth. What we're saying though is that we can take all those concepts and bring them together and this is what it means to be a fruit. Right? So schema is kind of the overarching framework, and the concepts themselves are the individual items that make up that particular schema. So what we want to look at is that within teaching and learning is how can we present concepts to students to help them learn effectively the new ideas that we're going to be giving to them. So one of the things that we're going to see is most effective is to most clearly define whatever the concept is that we're looking at. So again, if we're talking about apples, clearly define what an apple is. And so what that means is that we're going to start with the most typical example, like the most basic understanding. We're going to start with that first, right? So if we're talking about apples, we're not going to start with a green apple because yes, those exist. Yes, it's an apple, but it doesn't meet the criteria as well as if you just look at a normal red apple, right? So you can start with the most typical example first, and then we can look at the other variations, other things that still meet the criteria. We can look at non-examples if that would be something beneficial to help them make that distinction in their mind. But when teaching concepts, we want to start with the most basic, rudimentary ones first, and then we want to take that and see if we can link it to other things that we're already learning. Right? So anytime we can make those connections, that's what's going to be most beneficial for our students. And so there's a number of different ways in which we can look at concepts. One thing I might encourage everyone to do, just as an exploration on their own if they're interested, is to look at something called the pandemonium theory. All right, this comes from Selfridge. I remember when I learned about this in college, it is a little out there. It relates to how we process information with concepts, but it's just a little different. It's saying, just kind of an idea, it says we have these demons in our mind, and they are trying to help us recognize the individual features of different objects and things like that in our environment. And like I said, it's a weird theory. And it might be something worth looking into if you're interested in it. What we're going to see, though, is that over time as well, going back to Piaget, and he has this theory of assimilation and accommodation, as we are presented with new items, we can either assimilate that into the frameworks that we already have. So we can just say, how does this fit in with what I already know? How does this fit in with the concepts or schemas that I already have? Or when we look at accommodation, I am presented with this new information that completely changes everything that I know, and so I have to come up with completely new schemas. And so what we're going to see is that if we're doing this as adults still throughout our whole entire life, if working with children and adolescents, they're doing it even more so than us because they don't have as many schemas developed. So we're constantly trying to help them perfectly understand what concepts are, how things fit into different categories, if you will. And so the better examples we can use, the more connections we can have, that's what's going to help facilitate learning the most.